Welcome to Chapter 6 of The Art of War, Empty and Full. Although these terms, empty and full, invite us to think about a yin-yang sort of opposition, I want to suggest that that's not exactly what's going on here. Because the yin and the yang, the yin, even though it's usually characterized as moon versus sun or feminine versus masculine, this shouldn't be considered as a pure sort of a weakness or an absence or something that only reflects something else. Yin is its own character. However, within this chapter, the empty and the full, if we consider the empty as yin, it has almost a completely negative value. Empty is something that's always bad within this chapter. You attack the empty, and the empty can't defend itself. There's nothing about having emptiness which puts you at an advantage, except for the fact that if you have your opponent think that you're empty, if you have your opponent think that you're young, then you can entice them and then get them to attack. So it does have that slight psychological advantage. But unlike most yin characteristics, it doesn't have any further real advantage that's going to sort of work in opposition to the yang. Okay, so let's jump in. We have already discussed the first stanza here, where it says, first on the battlefield, waits for the enemy fresh, last on the battlefield, charges into the fray exhausted. And we discussed previously, I believe it was in chapter 4, what the meaning of this. I did want to skip ahead a little bit to where Sun Tzu writes, be sure of victory by attacking the undefended. Be sure of defense by defending the unattacked. Yeah, so that's a rather heinous way to go about doing battle, but that's probably the best way to do it. So you want to attack what's undefended. And he's going to give a lot of, Sun Tzu is going to give a lot of means a little bit later in this chapter to make something undefended. How do you take something that is full and make it empty? Because we always want to be attacking the empty. Next he writes, be sure of defense by defending the unattacked. And we have in the comments there by Tsang Yu one understanding of that. I wanted to put forth another, which is the idea that if you, as a general, are trying to have areas that are undefended, then those are sort of open game for you. You can always sort of, if you have something that's empty, you can always rush in and attack it. But as a general, you also want to keep those areas undefended. You want to keep them completely empty. So part of that might be defending the undefended area. In other words, you want to keep reinforcements from coming in, and in that sense, you're kind of defending the enemy. You're defending the part of the enemy that you want to keep undefended. Sorry, that's a little bit circuitous, but I hope it makes some sense. Moving on, he writes, the skillful warrior attacks so that the enemy cannot defend. He defends so that the enemy cannot attack. And I love Giles' note here. He says, an aphorism which puts the whole of the art of war into a nutshell. And I think that's apt, and he would know better than anyone. So you want to always position yourself so that your defense, your yang, is without yin, that you have no sort of no disadvantages that could come about by your attack. And at the same time, anytime that your enemy is defending himself, then you want him to be doing that in such a way that he has no possibility of attacking you whatsoever. And that is the art of war in a nutshell. All right, I want to skip ahead again a little bit. This is where Sun Tzu writes, the place I intend to attack must not be known. If it is unknown, the enemy will have to reinforce many places. The enemy will reinforce many places, but I shall attack few. By reinforcing his vanguard, he weakens his rear. By reinforcing his rear, he weakens his vanguard. By reinforcing his right flank, he weakens his left. By reinforcing his left, he weakens his right. By reinforcing every part, he weakens every part. Weakness stems from preparing against attack. Strength stems from obliging the enemy to prepare against attack. Okay, so just to sort of fill out a little bit what Sun Tzu is writing about here. if your enemy doesn't know where the attack is coming from, they're not going to just sit there and defend nothing, right? So if you say, Brandon, I'm going to punch you somewhere, I'm not going to just sort of stand there, probably. I might do something to try to help my situation out. So either I'll move my arms around a lot and waste a lot of energy trying to protect myself, or I might get in some stance that I think will protect me. Maybe I'll protect my vulnerable parts. And that's exactly what Sun Tzu is talking about. If the enemy doesn't know where the attack's going to hit, they're going to sort of scramble and try to do everything. If we're dealing with a limited amount of soldiers, this puts the person who's attacking at a really nice advantage. Anywhere your enemy moves some soldiers, he's taking soldiers from one place and making that place weaker in order to try to strengthen somewhere else. So next we take what I would call a turn in this chapter, and really in the art of war. This is a very personal note, and it's sort of getting down to brass tacks as far as Sun Tzu's getting hired. He writes, "According to my assessment, the troops of you are many, but that will avail them little in the struggle. So I say victory is still possible." So we see a couple of things here. The first thing is that Sun Tzu is giving his opinion in this specific battle. Next, he's saying that the troops of you are many. I assume that means more than your troops. So we're looking at a big army, and now it makes sense why he said all of these things that he said before. Regardless of the size of the army, it's still going to hold that when you send troops to reinforce at one place, it's going to weaken the other place. Everything that he said up to this point holds for a large army just as well as for a small army, and the things that he's going to say subsequently in the chapter also make sense within this context. His next point is also interesting. So he says, the enemy may be many, but we can prevent an engagement. How? We want to know. Scrutinize him, know the flaws in his plans, rouse him, discover the springs of his actions. So here, Sun Tzu is saying, you need a good strategist. You are outnumbered. You're looking at a force that is more powerful than the force that you have. That doesn't mean that there aren't weaknesses within this force, but you need somebody who has an eye for these sorts of things, who's going to be able to find the flaws, who's going to be able to scrutinize, who's going to be able to sort of do the mental and psychological investigations to sort of figure out what makes this person tick, to read the army, who knows the land, all these sorts of things that he's talked about previously within the art of war. This is all coming together. He's saying, I'm the person to do this job for you, particularly in a case like this, particularly when you're outnumbered, when you're looking at a stronger force, you have to rely even more on different sorts of tactics.